Guys, welcome to MyGuy review, spoiler-filled discussion, ending explained of this huge TV show that's currently hitting Netflix, 13 Reasons Why, based on the novel called 13 Reasons Why, following the story of Hannah's Baker's life and all kind of like listened through and kind of seen through the eyes of Clay. Now, I'm going to break down the 13 tapes as well. I'm going to talk about the spoilers, the discussions in each one and how things came about. But it kind of starts off, and at the first episode and the first kind of half an hour, I was on kind of everyone saying, yeah, they're kind of taking this element of suicide and they kind of glamorized it. And I almost fell for that. I was thinking, yes, they have. They're doing that because of tape and the way Hannah's first words come out, and you're thinking, oh, from beyond the grave, she's doing these things, and she had already kind of scripted her reasonings and she was going to live on in this manner. But it's not like that. I think this show and this TV show in particular and the book is more about we as a society should try and look out for these signs from people and trying to help and kind of cope through these things. Now, there are certain things and certain times where them who are going through those things also need to reach out, and it's really tough, and it's a very, very kind of sad story as a whole, with lots of elements in there which could have changed the course of her life as well. So it's all kind of based around Hannah's life and kind of the reasoning why she committed suicide and the 13 reasons leading up to that, and the 13 people who she kind of, I want to say she kind of blames for these aspects. Now, this review, I have to say and state at the start, we will be talking about adult themes throughout. There are elements of the show which are not suitable for all. There's a warning in front of the Netflix TV show as well, and I'll try my best to kind of like talk through those things and kind of talk through kind of like each tape and give a kind of breakdown of what happened. So we're going to be talking about Hannah Baker's story and kind of her motivations behind it. Now, even before Clay receives these tapes, of course, these have been listened to by other people, and I want to say, start off with, there's one person who's listened to them, or he's kind of like the guardian of them all, and I'll come back to him because there's a few elements of his motivation which just didn't seem understandable, but maybe as a child it all makes sense. But I'll explain that as we kind of go on. And the first tape is about Justin and Hannah kind of have their first kind of little date, and it's revealed, this is going to be her first kiss, and it's kind of leading up to that. So you listen to the tape and you're not really sure why is this kind of a bad thing to have a sweet little date in the playground, ends with a little kiss. And then there's the element where she says at the end, oh, people think we had sex on the first date, and she got a reputation because of that. But it wasn't implied at that point. It was because he took a photo of her at the top of the slide, which then one of his friends, Bryce, had taken those photos, and he had simply taken each and just forwarded it to a whole bunch of people, hence why unintentionally, not so much Justin's fault, but the fact that he's his mate and he showed the picture to his mate, he became number one on that list. And of course those photos kind of tainted Hannah's reputation thereafter in school, and she never truly could recover from that during that process. So while everything kind of leads and starts off with that one kind of photo and what should have been a good kind of first date, her first kiss, all those kind of things wasn't so innocent and kind of really shaped what was going to happen next. And so tape one will always be kind of Justin's kind of tape. Tape two is Jessica. Now, the way Jessica and Hannah meet is quite funny. They get forced to be kind of best friends in a way, and they have kind of a funny relationship, and it kind of works as well. And in this tape we also see that they meet Alex as well, and he's another misfit, and the three of them start going to the coffee shop together, and during that time the three of them create a good friendship, a good bond between the three of them. Eventually, according to Hannah and the way the tapes are kind of told us, is that Hannah says Alex no longer started to come into the coffee shop, and then eventually so does Jess. Jess stops as well. And then working in the cinema, she sees Jess come in one day, asks to buy a ticket, she gives her one, and then she realizes that she's going out with Alex. But what transpires and what Clay confronts Alex, and we find out, is Alex was with Jessica, and their relationship was kind of intimate, but Alex wanted to take it the next step forward. Jessica wasn't interested. He then created this hot list, which literally, as Hannah says, put a bullseye on her, in which he rates her as best ass and Jessica as worst. And that friendship, that was the only friendship she had, they met at the coffee shop, and Jessica slapped Hannah and accuses her of seducing Alex, her ex at that point. And yes, and ever since then that relationship was torn. And also this list is now in existence, which kind of gave her another kind of awful reputation, where she's known as best ass, and it really changed her kind of schooling from then on as well, because the first thing, she's already got this photo of herself out there, and now you got her name on this list. So she was kind of too, and now that moves you to straight into book or tape number 3, where it's Alex, and Alex is included because of the list, but of course the tape, she says, it putting her on that list kind of declared it open season on her body as or on herself, which is kind of what happened, especially because it kind of plagued unwanted attention from certain people, and Bryce in particular, who in the 7-Eleven convenience store, whatever you want to call it, where Alex goes and buys, not Alex, when she goes and buys her chocolate, Bryce is there and he says, I'll pay for that, but then he grabs her ass at that moment in store because of the list, and then says to her, Alex was right. And it turns out that Alex had included Hannah because obviously his spitefulness, but because of that whole kind of interaction between the two of them, it's now really put Hannah in kind of like a really awkward position, where this has just happened. She's been groped by Bryce in a store in front of, or kind of outseen, but still these things are happening. So now it's gone from just a photo, rumours and people saying stuff, to actually being, let's put it that way, physically assaulted by someone. Then we move on to Tyler. Now Tyler's the one where it's kind of the changing point in the show, because now everyone's throwing stones at his window as they get to the book. Now the reason why I'll say this, because everyone who read or listened to the tapes threw a stone through his window. Now what he did was despicable, but they didn't confront the people previous to this point, and they didn't confront the people who are about to come in later on. So Tyler's been stalking Hannah, and he's been taking photos, and he's a bit of an outcast anyway. Tyler, he's a photographer kind of guy, and he comes in later on and he's trying to do something which is not part of the book, but you can kind of see why, because he's also been bullied in school, he's also been picked on, but there is no justification to what Tyler's doing. He shouldn't be stalking people, he shouldn't be using his camera to take pictures of people while they're at home, while they're out and about, or anything outside of school, and in the remit of, this is the things you have to do, Tyler, because what you did was awful anyway. So Tyler is caught stalking Hannah, so Hannah doesn't know what's happening, so she asks her friend Courtney to come over, and will kind of try and catch him in the act. They get a little bit distracted, start having a few drinks, they play a bit of truth or dare, and then in that time Hannah and Taylor kind of make out. Hannah and Courtney. Taylor takes the flash and he takes the photo, and at that point they carry on kissing a little bit longer, but Hannah grabs the light, flashes it at Tyler, and she catches that it's Tyler who's taking these photos, and then Courtney ends their relationship as friendship, but also she'll become a member of the tapes because she's not a nice person. But then what people do have them been throwing stones at Tyler's window. But what Clay does, he takes an inappropriate picture of Tyler and he sends it out to the whole school of him butt naked, literally. And that is shared between the various people. So we move on to the next tape, take 5. Take 5 is Courtney. That's right, the girl who just was involved romantically with Hannah, who is the person she kissed. But then what she does is Courtney not only instigated the kiss, but she kind of forces lies upon Hannah and kind of makes out that it's Hannah who's embellishing those details. It's kind of Hannah who did this to her, Hannah that, when it was Courtney. So what Clay does, Clay listens to the tapes and he asks Courtney, why did you throw Hannah under the bus? You know, you destroyed her reputation. And she's like, oh, I apologize, all of that. But what Clay does, he takes her to a gravestone and sits her there and kind of leaves her there. And then obviously makes his own way back himself. But what Courtney did, again, is tainting her reputation in school. So up until this point, she's not had any friends. Each friend she's had has betrayed her. And has, if anything, caused her to have even worse reputation at school. So things aren't looking good for Hannah William at take 5. Things aren't good. And then we move on to Marcus. Marcus, the honor student, who's just basically, because of the reputation that Hannah's got throughout the course up until this point, which has been passed around by people to people, which is all awful things said by wrong kind of people, he then thinks he'll go on a date with Hannah as part of the Valentine's Day thing. And what he does, he then tries to force himself onto Hannah. And when she pushes him off, Marcus ditches the date and says, thought she was easy, and then laughs and kind of leaves, saying she's got a reputation, and this reputation has built over the course of the last few tapes. And these various people who've kind of caused that upon her and has accidentally given her this reputation. And people like Marcus think that is exactly who she is and the reasoning why, and hence why he's on the tape. Now, Marcus did what he did, and he, again, similar to someone else early on, placed a move on her and was not confronted by Clay. Clay didn't throw no rocks at his window, but he seemed it was fit to do so to Tyler. So again, this is where kind of like the show kind of, it's still a great show, but it just kind of deviates from kind of people's motivations as to why no one confronted him. Then we move literally straight on to the next person, Zach, who comes and sits next to her, pays for the meal, and kind of he kind of like is the friend she kind of needs for a little while. But then Zach tells Hannah, you know, he likes her for her personality and not her great ass. By this time, of course, Hannah's fed up with the hit list, and so she kind of rejects Zach's ego. And so basically he takes revenge in communications class, where he starts taking out her compliments as take revenge. So what she does, she writes a letter and explaining to Zach how she feels, and she puts the note into her own basket, which Zach then empties, and he reads the note, crumples it up, and he throws it on the floor. And we find out later on he hasn't actually done that, but what he does is he throws it away, and we're like, ouch, man, Zach, whew, that is harsh. So Zach, again, an only friend that she thought she had, has kind of squished any kind of resemblance. So this school is not treating her well at all so far. We're tape number 7, and things aren't looking that good for her. Then we move on to Ryan. Now, Ryan's the only person on this list who should have done more. Well, for some reason didn't. I'll explain later when we get to a few more bits. Now, Ryan is, he's in there, and he's only kind of like there as part of the poetry bit. So, Hannah kind of starts writing some poetry to kind of cope with what she's doing. You know, how she feels so far. Particularly, you know, kind of how lost she is in the world. And she finds solace in this poetry group that Ryan invites her to. Hannah is touched by Ryan's poetry and how he's expressing himself, the way he can kind of do that. So, Ryan encourages Hannah to start writing, having a journal, and kind of doing that. And she feels, again, she's found a friend. She's found someone she can kind of confide in. But it doesn't take Ryan that long to kind of take out a poem that she wrote from her journal, and he publishes it onto his magazine. And it's quite a racy poem at this point as well. And it's the one that she does while they're there. And now he kind of publishes it, but he didn't put a name next to it. He just published that, and she made it into the tapes. And he's kind of tape number 8. Now Ryan is aware of what's happened previously, and he hasn't confronted a single person to this point. And he doesn't hang around in any of their crews. He's not part of Zach's crew, Marcus' crew, Alex's, Justin, nothing. And yet he hasn't confronted a single soul other than throw a rock through Tyler's window. This is where it kind of gets frustrating. Why haven't you done anything? Because you've listened to all the tapes. You know how she's been through. You know the things she's been through. And you still didn't do nothing. Then we move on to tape number 9. Number 9 is Sherry. Sherry, again, at some point we think she's a bit of a friend of Hannah, and they kind of go to the party together. They're going to Jesse's house, and there's a party. And there are 3 parts to the party, but this is the first of 3 tapes, tape number 9. And on this one, they've decided to leave the party a little bit earlier. So Sherry offers to drive Hannah home, and while they're driving home, they're searching for the phone charger. Sherry crashes straight into a stop sign. Hannah tells her, "Oh, you need to call the police. You have to call the police." Sherry's like, "No, I can't. My dad's super strict. He'll kill me. I can't do this. No, it's not possible." And then she runs off. Hannah runs into a convenience store asking for a phone so she can call the police while Sherry drives off. Hannah's kind of actions are a little bit too late because there's been an accident by that point and someone has died. And we might as well say, because I don't think we'll revisit this is obviously Jeff. And Jeff is an amazing dude. He's pretty sick in this whole show. He's just a fun, cool dude. And unfortunately, he dies at the intersection. And he's Clay's best friend in school. So is Tony. But he's his friend who he helps with his education and stuff. And he's just cool dude. He has no affiliation with anybody. He's not on no tapes or nothing. And again, this all happened because of the kind of the intersection now. So Sherry's got this on her head, and she has inadvertently killed the poor kid Jeff. Later on, we find out what she is doing. She's actually working with the family who was involved in the accident. She's kind of just helping them go through their day-to-day because of what's happened. And she feels the guilt of that. But there's more, and she needs to confront the guilt, and she needs to tell the police what's happened, because Jeff's family need closure as well, because they were under the impression that Jeff was intoxicated and he caused the accident. But for some reason, an autopsy would tell you that. So he's not intoxicated, or he is intoxicated. That's quite simple. But Sherry, what she did was awful, and she refused to take kind of her own she didn't take ownership of what she did. And by the time Hannah finds out, those actions are too late. And when she confronts Clay to apologize, Clay has none of this because he's lost his best friend, and he's having none of it. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He's kind of in a dark place as well. So tape number 9 is all you, Sherry. And again, you've listened to the tapes to this point, Sherry. Why didn't you confront anyone previous to this and the things they did when you're kind of worried about just yourself? Or Ryan, previously, he didn't confront Sherry. And again, all these things kind of just unravel. Number 10. Now, I think number 10 was Clay. Or was Clay 11? Because it's Justin. Anyway, so I'll go straight to Clay's tape. Clay's tape, he's not in there because he's done something specifically wrong, similar to the other people where they made lists, so they kind of tainted her reputation, or in Sherry's case, knocked over a stop sign, which is killed someone, or published something. Now, he's in there because his was more of an innocent thing. They had a kind of a little back and forth throughout, and it's a bit of a confusing kind of time, and they didn't really get together. And I think that's why Clay's in there, because there are times where you watch the show where they could have, she leaves it open for Clay to kind of make a move to say, or put his arm around her when they're watching the meter rides, or kind of anything, and it just never worked for the two of them. Then we're at the party, and they're about to hook up together, and Hannah is plagued by all these thoughts about how she will kind of influence him, and he will no longer be the person she always wants him to be, and he'll be different. And because of that, Clay's in here. Now, Clay's in here. What Clay's been doing to this point is confronting people throughout, but not confronting Zach and the other guys. He's confronted random bit bobs so far, but he's not done, everything that he should have done, maybe, in my opinion. But anyway, he has been. Then we move into Justin part 2. Now, this is Justin and Hannah's tape in a way, because this is one of the most awful things to happen on the tapes so far. And up until this point, if anyone's listened to the tapes, they should have all taken action on what we're about to listen to, because there is no way you can listen to this tape and not do anything. You can't sit there idly. You know what's happened. And yes, Justin has tried to confront Jessica about this, and he's tried to tell her about it, but she's having none of this. So this is the tape where we'll go back to the party again, and the tape is about Justin, kind of Hannah. So Clay and Hannah were kind of getting it on, but Hannah kind of says, no, Clay, can't have this. So Clay leaves the room. Hannah sits on the bed for a little while, and then Justin and Jessica bust into the room and start hooking up. But Jessica's drunk, so Justin kind of backs off and he leaves. On his way out, he meets Bryce at the door. What Hannah doesn't see is what happens, where he's at the door and he says to Bryce, she's a bit drunk, we'll leave her. And then Bryce kind of insists and pushes her way into the bedroom. And then Justin comes back into the bedroom and confronts Bryce, to only be shoved and kind of pushed back down out of the room, and he locks the door. And then he does the unthinkable to Jessica, which is kind of talked about throughout this whole, hinted at throughout, that things like these are going to happen. And he has his way with an unconscious Jessica, with Hannah watching, being in the room. Now she feels she can't come out of the closet to help her friend, because it's not possible, because Bryce will obviously do the same to her, even push Justin out the room, and Justin sits downstairs crying, and he realizes what's happened. And after the tapes are done, they tell her, and she's like, no, she still doesn't believe this. But none of the guys up until that point confront Bryce for what actions he has just committed, and nothing happens to Bryce to this point. As the kind of the TV show unravels and we get to the final episode, finally, Hannah's tapes and what Justin's saying, what everyone's kind of saying, sinks into Jessica, and Jessica confronts and tells her dad for the first time, Dad, this is what's happened to me. And hopefully there'll be some form of justice, and Bryce will get his comeuppances. But we don't see any of that yet. But that's one of kind of like the points where all these people, Ryan, everyone up until this point knew exactly what happened, but not one of them confront him. And the 12th and most awful tape is the Bryce tape. Again, the climax of the TV show, and again the devastating climax of the TV show, when Hannah's having her worst day of her life, where she accidentally drops the money that they need banking for their parents' shop. Their parents have a go at her. She's kind of really distraught. She finds her way into a party, and she joins a hot tub, but she hasn't brought a bathing suit or anything. She strips down to her bra and underwear, and she's kind of just in the hot tub with these guys, and then everybody leaves, and then Hannah's the only one left, so she looks into the stars and kind of contemplates what's happening, and she's left kind of vulnerable. And then comes in Bryce, who had just committed the unthinkable to Jessica, and he then does the same to Hannah. and this just completely breaks her soul, and this is just kind of the worst thing that could happen to her, and the worst thing we've seen and happen again with the same evil person. But what we don't understand, and one of the most frustrating things about maybe the show, maybe the way the book's written, is Tony's character. He's not involved in any of this, but there's a scene where he says to Clay, we were beating up someone because they said something about my sister, and yet he listened to the tapes and he didn't confront Bryce. Him and his brothers could have confronted Bryce. Justin confronts Bryce right at the end when it's too late. Clay confronts Bryce and he gets beaten up. Tony could have confronted Bryce. Ryan could have confronted Bryce. Alex just wants to become friends with them and he thinks he wants to be part of their crew. He does not confront. Tyler did not confront Bryce. None of them did. They all sat on this awful kind of information that they've been told and been explained what's happened, and none of them acted on this one or two horrific acts. And this is the acts that really just absolutely shatter and destroy a soul, and there's no coming back from. And that's what's happened in the show. And then she finally goes and she confronts and tries to talk to an adult for the first time to explain what's happened. And for some reason, maybe it's the way the book's written, maybe the way they want to do the TV show, it's like his phone's going off and he can't pay attention to Hannah, who's trying to explain to him what's happening. She records the whole thing and he's going to be tape number 13, but she won't use the words and he's not using the words, and he's kind of essentially saying, you should just move on, it's fine. He's not helping because he doesn't understand. She's maybe not giving him enough information to kind of go on. And between the two of them, unfortunately, they do not get to the conclusion that is needed to resolve the issue that's just happened. This is the actual final tape and the actual final words of Hannah, who then we see buys the razor blades and does the bathtub, and things obviously happen thereafter. But unfortunately, this one time where an adult was confronted and spoken to about the whole situation, he seems and is portrayed to be distracted and not giving her the attention and really kind of getting the information out from her and taking or understanding her point of view, or she's not able to kind of explain what's happened, and neither of them can explain why. And it's just awful a way to end. And you can see and you understand the reasoning why this person had to commit, or this person not had to, the reason why this person did commit suicide. So many things have happened in her school life to the point where her whole innocence, her whole life, her likelihood, everything is taken away in a matter of a year at school, or whatever it is, 6 months at school, and going to that party by accident, stumbling across the most awful person in the whole school, and having that happen to her. It's absolutely devastating and absolutely destructive on her life, and it kind of leads up to that point where then she does what she does, and the show doesn't justify the reasoning. So let's just not be say yes, it glorifies the commitment, the committing of suicide. No, it doesn't. I thought it did early days in the very first episode, where I hear her voice and she's from the dead and she does all of those kind of cool things, and you're like, haha, this is quite funny. But it's not. As you see her character arc come down to the very end, it just seems for her, in her head, there was no other choice. Now, there are times where she could have spoken to her parents. She could have maybe reached out and got help. But then at the same time, the parents or the families around, none of them seem to kind of see the signs that this girl needs help. This girl is reaching out. There is so much happening at school, early doors, where maybe moving would have been a good option. Who knows? But there's so many family issues that they keep showing that she's not able to talk to her parents throughout, to kind of give her help or give her guidance or look at moving schools or whatever they needed to do to resolve it early doors, because the pharmacy's not doing well. And they couldn't help her. She couldn't seem to reach out to them. But there is a moment right at the very end where she does buy the razor blades, takes them off, and her mum is seen, and you see her really nice to them, and you think maybe there could have been times where they could have stopped all of this early doors, but it wasn't done. A lot of the characters in the TV show, great actors. Little Clay, who was in Don't Breathe, where again, the ends does not justify the means. Do not steal from a blind veteran, but once you're in there, you find out the kind of person he is and the things he's up to. But you guys are thieves, so the means doesn't justify the end. And it's similar here. Maybe there were stop signs, there were signs that you could have looked out for. She needed to reach out to someone, and unfortunately Clay couldn't help her throughout, and hence why Tony says, yes, you are the reason why she killed herself. And he puts that burden on Clay, and it's not Clay's responsibility because he's still a kid. It's the parents, where most people would say it's the parents' fault, but then they need to know the signs, and they need to talk to the kids about these things. They need to understand. Now this is a TV show. Yes, there's a bit of funniness in it. There's a bit of humor. There's dark elements to it, but it's a eye opener for people. And a discussion kind of needs to be happening. Like, what are things that happen at school? What now with social media happening 24/7, kids aren't safe from being bullied and things happening, and parents need to be more involved in that and know the signs and kind of understand the kids and know that they're very different now than they would have ever been. Growing up now is more difficult than it would have been back before mobile phones were around in primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, universities, whatever it is. And it's more difficult, and parents need to be aware of these things. Shows like this kind of are an eye-opener, based on a book, by the way. It's not really just a TV show. But at the same time, it's not glorifying anything. The things that happen are horrific, and it can so easily go down that path. If you look at what happened with Justin, with the photo early doors, which then got Alex to do what he did because of his relationship with another person, and he set the tone from thereafter. Unfortunately, she got a reputation because of things outside of her reach she had nothing to do with. And then to the point where someone like Bryce is there in their school. She needs help. People need to know about the kind of the signs. One of the most frustrating things about the show is people like Tony, people like Ryan, they all know what Bryce did, but not one of them confront him. All scared about their tiny reputation. Ryan doesn't have a reputation that's going to get ruined. He just published something. Not a big deal. Like, it's all our reputation. Those aspects of the TV show don't work for me. I find it really frustrating where someone who's listened to the whole thing, knows what's happened. It's got nothing to do with them. Nothing's going to happen to them. Just get on board and just kind of resolve those issues early doors, But still a great TV show. One well worth watching. The end, there shouldn't be a season 2. Plain and simple. It's a great show. Great, fantastic show. Keep it as season 1. The end kind of ends with a lot of little kind of nuggets left in the world. Alex unfortunately commits suicide because of all of the things and the guilt he feels, and he's hanging around with Bryce, and something he shouldn't have been doing, but he's the one. He realizes that he instigated all that. Jessica finally speaks to her dad and realizes what's happened to her. By Bryce is not happening, and she can't live with it anymore. She confronts and tells her dad about it, and her alcoholism kind of catches up with her throughout the show, and I think she realizes at some point that's what's happening, hence why she becomes kind of more and more into alcoholism. Courtney kind of confronts and confesses to her parents as to the kind of person she is and what she did. Sherry phones at the police and explains what she did in all of this, and knocking over the sign, so she's kind of taking ownership of that. Justin confronts Bryce, and he gets kind of a bit of a beat down. Clay confronts Bryce, he gets a beat down. So some of the people were taking ownership and realised what they've done, and kind of like the last bit is where we see Tyler throughout the show has been kind of pushed around and punched around and pushed everywhere. Alex is the only one who says, "Oh, leave him alone." And he's seen taking lots of guns and weapons with him to school. And he puts up loads of pictures of these various people, including Clay, because even Clay was a bit of a not so good person to him. He puts all these pictures up, and we get the feeling that he's going to do something as well. And the show ends with Tony and his boyfriend and Clay and the girl, after Clay realises what he needs to start doing is to speak to people, kind of be more open again, not closed off, help others. He kind of gets the understanding, and he changes for that fact, and for the better. But of course, Hannah's gone, but he still understood the reasoning, and he kind of helps someone else. And so he's coming on board, and he's helping others instead. And they kind of all drive off into the sunset, and their story's finished. And I think there shouldn't be a season 2. I mean, Hannah's kind of done what she's done. Hannah's left the tapes for those people. Now, all you need was a couple minute wrap up where they could say Bryce has gone into prison, or Tony punched him up or something. Justin's left his mum, his deadbeat mum, and he's off on his way to kind of find himself in the world. Jessica's told her dad what's happened. All of those things all wrapped up. So I don't see why you need a season 2, but I'm still down for it. I'll watch a season 2. Love the show. It's a great show. It's more of an eye-opener. It's not something that is glorifying the committing of suicide. This is just the theme of the show. But an excellent show. Well worth it. Check it out. Tell me what you think. Hit me up with your discussions, your likes and stuff on the bottom, or the various tapes. Also, which is really cool and really super eerie, you can actually listen to Hannah's tapes by themselves. I listened to a few of them. They are super eerie. It's literally just Hannah explaining what happened, tape 1 to tape 13, and it's just her by herself, not the TV where you listen to a bit, it flicks between Clay and stuff. It is super scary. Worth checking out if you love the show. So tell me what you think. Hit me up with your likes and stuff, and for all things and subscribe for more things, all things TV, movie, games, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, hit me up.